Women over 60, 5 things you should never do for a man, no matter how much you love him. Let's be honest, at this age, women rarely lose relationships because they aren't loving enough. In fact, the opposite is usually true. Women over 60 lose themselves and eventually lose the relationship because they love too deeply in ways that quietly undermine their own worth. Years of giving, caring, and accommodating can create a habit of overextending yourself without noticing when that love starts crossing into self-sacrifice. And once that line is crossed, a man doesn't feel more connected to you, he feels less. This is why it's so important to pay attention before you give away one more piece of yourself. Love should never require you to shrink, bend, or mold your life around someone else's comfort. Yet many women do exactly that, believing it will strengthen the relationship, when in reality, it slowly erodes their value in a man's eyes. The things you think will make him love you more often become the things that make him take you for granted. So today, we're going to be very clear and maybe even a little uncomfortable. I'm revealing the 5 things a woman over 60 should never do for a man. Not for reassurance, not for attention, and not even if he feels like the greatest love you've ever known. These boundaries are not about withholding affection. They're about protecting your identity, your dignity, and the kind of emotional stability that keeps a relationship healthy and balanced. And if you've ever found yourself wondering why giving more doesn't bring you closer, why doing everything right still feels wrong, or why your effort seems to go unnoticed, then this is the video you genuinely need. Because once you understand these 5 things, you'll finally see why real love after 60 doesn't come from giving endlessly, it comes from giving wisely. Subscribe to this channel right now because we're about to identify 5 specific things you should never do for a man, no matter how much you love him or how much you want the relationship to work.
Abandoning your friendships, interests, and commitments just to be constantly available for him. The first mistake many women over 60 make, especially when a new relationship feels exciting, is quietly letting their own life fade into the background. It starts subtly, skipping book club here, canceling lunch with a friend there, putting hobbies on hold, rearranging plans just in case he wants to see you. What feels like prioritizing the relationship at first slowly becomes a pattern of shrinking your world until he becomes the center of it. And while it feels like you're showing love, what you're actually showing is emotional overinvestment, and nothing kills attraction faster. When you abandon the parts of your life that make you interesting, fulfilled, and independent, you don't become more desirable, you become more predictable. You turn into someone who's always available, always flexible, always accommodating. And no matter how kind or loving that seems, it sends a message: your time isn't valuable, your schedule doesn't matter, and your life revolves around him. That's not romance, that's self-erasure. Relationship therapist Esther Perel has long taught that desire cannot thrive without space. When you collapse the distance between you and a partner, when you rush to answer every text, keep every night open, or drop everything the moment he calls, you remove the tension that creates longing. Instead of being someone he looks forward to seeing, you become part of his routine. The excitement disappears not because he stopped caring, but because there's nothing left for him to reach toward. And there's a deeper consequence. Once a man senses that your world revolves around him, he begins treating your time and energy as endlessly flexible. He cancels freely because he knows you'll adjust. He makes plans with others first because he knows you'll wait. Over time, he stops valuing what he once admired: your independence, your confidence, your full life. And when that respect erodes, so does the relationship. Your standards should be clear and firm. Your friendships, interests, and commitments existed before he arrived, and they should continue whether he stays or goes. A healthy man will never ask you to abandon the life you built. He will respect that you have people to see, passions to pursue, and a schedule that matters. In fact, he will appreciate it because it is your independence that keeps the relationship balanced and attractive. Never sacrifice the richness of your life in exchange for constant availability. Keep your circle of friends strong. Maintain the hobbies that bring you joy. Continue showing up for the commitments that give your life meaning. If a man truly values you, he will make room for those things. If he resents them, you've already learned everything you need to know.
2. Lending him significant money or becoming his financial safety net. The second boundary you must never cross for a man, especially after 60, is stepping into the role of his financial rescuer. At this stage of life, your resources are not easily replaced. Your income is likely fixed or limited, and you don't have decades ahead to rebuild what you lose. Yet countless women over 60 still fall into the trap of lending money to men who never repay, or quietly absorbing financial responsibilities for men who gradually become dependent on them. It often begins innocently, with a partner describing a temporary setback or short-term hardship, and because you're compassionate and stable, you step in to help. But temporary problems have a way of becoming permanent when someone realizes you are willing to fund the solution. Financial exploitation in later life is far more common than most women realize, and romantic partners are one of the leading sources of it. Psychologists who work with older adults warn that financial abuse almost always follows a familiar pattern. A man presents himself as someone facing a brief, unfortunate difficulty. He may emphasize that he simply needs a small amount to bridge the gap. Repayment is promised, reassured, and emphasized in a way that builds trust. Once that trust is established, the requests grow, repayments slow, excuses multiply, and eventually, emotional manipulation replaces accountability. Instead of acknowledging the debt, he shifts the conversation to love, loyalty, guilt, or sacrifice, anything to make you feel unreasonable for wanting your own money back. Another variation of this dynamic appears when a man doesn't explicitly ask for loans, but subtly places himself in a financial position where you become responsible for everything. He may consistently choose activities he cannot afford, expect you to cover dinners and travel, or simply remain passive in situations where shared expenses are appropriate. Over time, what began as generosity becomes expectation. Your willingness to treat him becomes the foundation of the relationship, and when you finally attempt to set limits, you're met with surprise or even indignation. Your boundaries are reframed as selfishness, and your financial comfort is turned into an obligation rather than a personal achievement. A third version emerges when a man moves into your home under the guise of practicality or temporary need. He might be between jobs or trying to get back on his feet. Yet months or years later, you may find yourself supporting an adult man who contributes little and depends entirely on you. The longer this dynamic continues, the harder it becomes to correct, because dependence creates entitlement, and entitlement rarely reverses itself without firm, uncomfortable boundaries. Your standard must be unwavering. Never lend money to a romantic partner, regardless of how compelling his story sounds or how temporary the problem appears. Never allow a man you are dating to become financially dependent on you. Never consistently pay for everything, even if you can afford to. A man who respects you will understand that your financial security is the result of decades of discipline and hard work, and he will never jeopardize it. A man with genuine, short-term difficulties will find solutions that do not involve draining your resources. And any man who reacts with anger, guilt-tripping, or emotional pressure when you set financial boundaries was never looking for partnership. He was looking for someone to fund his comfort. 3. Tolerating disrespect to avoid conflict or avoid losing him. The third boundary you must never compromise is your tolerance for disrespect. Many women over 60 become so accustomed to keeping the peace, so fearful of conflict, and so afraid of being alone that they begin accepting behavior they would have walked away from without hesitation in their 40s or 50s. You tell yourself it's minor. You tell yourself he didn't mean it. You tell yourself everyone has flaws and that speaking up will only make things worse. But beneath all those justifications lies a painful truth. Every time you excuse disrespect, you're demonstrating exactly how little respect you require. Disrespect rarely arrives dramatically. It begins subtly. Small comments that feel slightly off, interruptions that feel dismissive, tone shifts that make you shrink rather than stand tall. Because each moment seems too minor to confront, you hesitate. You don't want to appear overly sensitive, demanding, or dramatic, so you stay quiet. But the moment you remain silent, the dynamic shifts. Silence is read as acceptance, and acceptance becomes permission. What starts with a dismissive remark grows into disregard for your time, your feelings, and your presence. And by the time the disrespect becomes undeniable, the pattern has already taken deep root. Psychologist Dr. Harriet Lerner teaches that silence in the face of disrespect is not harmony, it is self-abandonment. When you allow someone to speak to you dismissively, make decisions that affect you without consultation, or treat your time as insignificant, you are not maintaining peace, you are trading your dignity for temporary comfort. And the relationship you think you're preserving is already compromised, because it is being built on uneven ground. His entitlement and your reluctance to speak up. Another painful truth is this: when you avoid conflict to keep a man, you don't keep him, you simply keep the version of him who knows he can treat you poorly without consequence. And instead of deepening connection, your silence convinces him that you are not someone who requires care, consideration, or respect. Many women misunderstand this dynamic, believing that adaptability and tolerance will make them easier to love. The reality is the opposite. The more disrespect you tolerate, the less valuable you appear in his eyes. What you accept, he interprets as what you deserve. But the inverse is also true. The moment you calmly acknowledge a disrespectful comment or action, you set the tone for the entire relationship. A healthy man will take accountability, correct the behavior, and never repeat it. A man who becomes defensive, dismissive, or irritated by your boundary reveals exactly who he is. And that clarity is a gift. It saves you from months or years of mistreatment that would have only escalated. Your standard must be unwavering. The very first time, not the 10th, a man speaks to you dismissively, disregards your time, or crosses a line, you address it directly and calmly. You do not apologize for having a boundary. You do not soften the truth. You simply state, "That was disrespectful. Please don't speak to me that way." What he does next tells you everything. If he genuinely apologizes and changes, you've established the foundation of mutual respect. If he minimizes, blames, or continues the behavior, you walk away with clarity and self-respect intact. Because tolerating disrespect to keep a man never results in love. It results in misery. And staying with someone who does not respect you is far lonelier than being alone.
4. Changing your fundamental values or beliefs just to align with him. The fourth boundary is perhaps the most dangerous to cross because it reaches into the deepest part of who you are. Preferences can be negotiated, lifestyle habits can be adjusted, and daily routines can evolve in a relationship. Those are normal compromises. But your core values,
your beliefs, your sense of right and wrong, and the principles that have guided your life for 6 decades or more are not negotiable under any circumstance. When you alter those to match a man's expectations, you're not compromising, you're abandoning yourself. Self-betrayal in relationships rarely happens all at once. It begins quietly, often in the name of avoiding conflict. You soften your voice when discussing something important to you. You avoid expressing opinions that differ from his because you don't want to be criticized. You step back from activities and commitments that once mattered deeply because he makes you feel foolish or misguided for caring. You tell yourself these things are small, that they don't define you, that harmony is more important than fully expressing who you are. Yet each small step away from your values becomes another thread pulled from the fabric of your identity. Over time, this internal erosion becomes impossible to ignore. You begin feeling disconnected from yourself, confused about your own needs, disengaged from passions that once mattered, and strangely hollow in a relationship that was supposed to make you feel more alive. Humanistic psychologists call this incongruence, the painful gap between who you truly are and the version of yourself you present to keep the relationship intact. That emotional tension becomes anxiety, depression, irritability, or numbness, not because something is wrong with your mental health, but because something is wrong with the way you are treating yourself. What makes this dynamic even more damaging is that abandoning your values does not make a man respect you more. It has the opposite effect. When a man sees you silencing your beliefs to avoid his disapproval, stepping away from causes or convictions to prevent conflict, or distancing yourself from family or traditions to fit his preferences, he doesn't interpret it as devotion. He interprets it as weakness. Instead of admiring your flexibility, he questions the strength of your character. Instead of appreciating your effort, he loses respect for your backbone. And any relationship built on one person's dominance and the other's self-erasure is destined to collapse under the weight of inequality. Healthy relationships create space for two full identities to coexist. They do not require agreement on every issue, shared beliefs on every topic, or identical values across all areas of life. What they require is mutual respect. When you stand firmly in your beliefs and say, "This is who I am," the right man doesn't feel threatened. He feels clarity. He knows who he is dealing with, and he adjusts accordingly. Respect is built when you remain grounded in your authenticity, not when you twist yourself into someone you hope he'll approve of. Your standard must be non-negotiable. Your core values are never up for discussion, modification, or dilution. The right man will honor them even when he disagrees. The wrong man will pressure you to change them because he is more interested in control than connection. And if maintaining a relationship requires the abandonment of your deepest convictions, then the relationship itself is the thing that needs to be abandoned. Because no partnership is worth the cost of losing yourself. And once your values are gone, there is nothing left to protect you, guide you, or give your life meaning. 5. Sacrificing your relationship with your children or grandchildren to keep him happy. The fifth boundary is one of the most serious because it reaches into the heart of what matters most to many women over 60: family. At this stage of life, your children and grandchildren are often central to your sense of purpose, belonging, and emotional fulfillment. Yet some men interpret these relationships not as a source of joy, but as competition. Instead of respecting the deep bonds you've built over a lifetime, they subtly or directly pressure you to choose between your role as a mother or grandmother and your role as their partner. This is not love, this is control, and it is one of the clearest signs that a man is emotionally unhealthy. When a man begins commenting negatively about your children, questioning how much time you spend with them, or implying that they are too demanding, he is not offering insight. He is attempting to reshape your priorities to center around him. The pressure often begins gently, disguised as a desire for more quality time together. But over time, it evolves into scheduling conflicts, guilt-tripping, subtle criticism, or emotional withdrawal when you choose family over him. These tactics are designed to create tension between you and the people who love you most, weakening your support system and increasing his influence over your life. The danger in this pattern lies in how easy it can be to justify. You tell yourself he simply wants to feel close to you. You remind yourself that relationships require time and effort. You convince yourself that reducing a visit here or skipping a family gathering there isn't such a sacrifice. But gradually, the distance grows, not because you want it, but because you're trying to keep the peace with a man who is threatened by your family connections. And while you're working to avoid conflict, your children and grandchildren begin to notice your absence, your hesitation, or the growing influence of someone who doesn't seem to appreciate how important they are in your life. Any man who attempts to weaken your family relationships is not trying to build a partnership. He is trying to isolate you. Isolation is one of the earliest signs of an emotionally abusive dynamic, especially for older women. When a man discourages you from spending time with your children, criticizes your family, or creates conflict during family interactions, what he is really saying is, "I want control, and your family is in my way." No healthy partner views the people you love as obstacles. No loving man competes with your children or grandchildren. And no relationship that demands you sacrifice your family can ever bring long-term peace or happiness. Healthy men behave very differently. They understand that your family is not a threat, but an extension of your life. They make an effort to show kindness, respect, and genuine interest in the people who matter to you. They don't demand that you reduce contact or loyalty. They work to earn a place within the family circle. They encourage, not restrict, your time with those you love. They know that a woman who feels secure in her family bonds brings more stability, joy, and emotional strength into the relationship. Your standard must be absolute. Your relationships with your children and grandchildren are sacred, lifelong, and irreplaceable. Any man who tries to diminish, criticize, disrupt, or compete with those relationships is showing you exactly who he is. And the man who truly cares for you will never ask you to choose between him and your family, because he understands that if he loves you, he must also respect the people who are part of your heart. Choose your family, always, because they were there long before he arrived, and they will remain long after he is gone. And any man who deserves a place in your life will never make you question that truth.
Here's what these 5 things share. They're all forms of self-betrayal that women engage in, hoping to secure love, but that actually guarantee the opposite. When you abandon your independent life, drain your financial resources, tolerate disrespect, betray your values, or sacrifice family relationships for a man, you're not demonstrating love, you're demonstrating desperation. And desperation repels the kind of healthy, secure man you actually want, while attracting men who exploit your willingness to sacrifice yourself. Margaret, Linda, Patricia, Helen, Dorothy, Ruth, Barbara, Carol, Susan. All of these women either learned these lessons through painful experience or avoided pain by maintaining boundaries from the beginning. The ones who sacrificed themselves for men universally regretted it. The ones who maintained their standards universally found better partners or found peace in being alone rather than diminished. At 60 and beyond, you don't have unlimited time or energy to waste on relationships that require you to become smaller, poorer, less respected, less authentic, or more isolated. You've spent decades becoming who you are. Don't abandon that person for any man. The right man won't ask you to. He'll value your independence, respect your financial boundaries, treat you with consistent respect, honor your core values, and embrace your family relationships. That man exists, but you'll never find him if you're contorting yourself for men who require self-betrayal as the price of their attention. Leave a comment below if you've done any of these things for a man and what you learned from the experience. Share this video with women who need permission to stop sacrificing themselves for relationships that don't serve them. You deserve a partnership that makes you more yourself, not less. Never settle for anything that requires you to betray who you are. I'll see you in the next video. Here's what these 5 things share. They're all forms of self-betrayal that women engage in, hoping to secure love, but that actually guarantee the opposite. When you abandon your independent life, drain your financial resources, tolerate disrespect, betray your values, or sacrifice family relationships for a man, you're not demonstrating love, you're demonstrating desperation. And desperation repels the kind of healthy, secure man you actually want, while attracting men who exploit your willingness to sacrifice yourself. Margaret, Linda, Patricia, Helen, Dorothy, Ruth, Barbara, Carol, Susan. All of these women either learned these lessons through painful experience or avoided pain by maintaining boundaries from the beginning. The ones who sacrificed themselves for men universally regretted it. The ones who maintained their standards universally found better partners or found peace in being alone rather than diminished. At 60 and beyond, you don't have unlimited time or energy to waste on relationships that require you to become smaller, poorer, less respected, less authentic, or more isolated. You've spent decades becoming who you are. Don't abandon that person for any man. The right man won't ask you to. He'll value your independence, respect your financial boundaries, treat you with consistent respect, honor your core values, and embrace your family relationships. That man exists, but you'll never find him if you're contorting yourself for men who require self-betrayal as the price of their attention. Leave a comment below if you've done any of these things for a man and what you learned from the experience. Share this video with women who need permission to stop sacrificing themselves for relationships that don't serve them. You deserve a partnership that makes you more yourself, not less. Never settle for anything that requires you to betray who you are. I'll see you in the next video.